Caroline Walker. Say hi, because you just look like a student among my other students. And she was really kind to have us in her studio. I know it's only there, and at some point she can, give us a ride and show us what's going on and what she's working on. So Caroline, I'm gonna just start with, the usual question so far. And then, yes, I should invite all my colleagues, but especially the students. Please don't be shy. Ask, because it's a chance to learn. You can you have here in the lower bar, Ridika Mona. Now raise your hand if you want to put a question, or just type them on the chat, and I will read them out loud, or Caroline will. Okay, so Caroline, I don't know when you finish your university studies. It's not that important. What it's maybe more important is, how did you feel after you graduated? Were you really prepared for what came next? And what was the first thing you did to put up a career that you successfully have right now as a painter, as an artist?
Well, I think it was a bit up and down. So I did I think all the students here are all undergraduate, aren't they? So I finished my undergraduate degree in 2004. And then after that, I just got a studio and was working part-time, and still painting and just applying for lots of competitions and things like that, and applying to do an MA. So I came down to London to do an MA in 2007, which I finished in 2009, which was quite a difficult time to be graduating really and starting a career, because it was just after the big financial crash. So of course there wasn't really, like, the art market had been like, I don't know, suddenly all the galleries were closing, and there was a lot of there didn't seem to be that same kind of setting that you could enter. But I was quite lucky in that I won a prize when I graduated that gave me a studio for a year and a show at the end of it. So I had this first kind of thing to aim for. And I think that really helped me keep the momentum after art school, because I think you kind of build up towards this degree show, like this kind of final point of something, and then it can feel a bit flat afterwards, because you're like, then you're on your own in a studio, if you've got a studio, and there's nobody kind of motivating you to keep working. But I guess I just sort of, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to being in the right place at the right time, or fostering the right relationships. A lot of the early points in my career were helped along by meeting some curators and writers that really helped me. So Jane Neal, I don't know if you met.
Yeah, we know Jane Neal.
Yeah, so Jane
she was often in Cluj.
Yeah. And also Matt Price. I don't know if you know Matt. He's a writer. It was him that first introduced me to Jane, actually. So I think just, it was quite stop and start though. Like you'd get a sort of show and then nothing much would happen for a while. It'd be, I've run out of money. What am I going to do? And I'd say there was a few years of that kind of like, suddenly like it seemed like you're getting somewhere, and then it would go a bit flat again. And I guess the proper sort of shift kind of happened really when I started working with my gallery in Amsterdam, which was about five years ago, something like that. So, and then since then it's been very sort of consistent, really.
And Caroline, how did you approach all these curators and writers? just you went straight ahead with a piece of painting under your armpit? This is a topic for us, you know. Yeah, you don't want to be too daring, but still you want to get.
It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a
I would
thing.
think it's a bit like dating or something. You have to kind of not look like you're too keen. But in the case of
Comparison.
in the case of Jane and Matt, that was they got in touch with me because they'd seen my degree show. So I don't know. I mean, that was in 2009, 2010. So things are different now. I mean, that's a sort of pre-Instagram kind of time. And I suppose I made the most of having a degree show and kind of, you know, tried to meet people and give them my card and keep those relationships. And I think that's been quite key. If I've met somebody once and had an interesting conversation with them, I've always followed up, and quite a lot of the people that support me. So there's a kind of art advisor curator that I still work with quite a lot via my galleries, but I met them at my degree show in Glasgow. So that was in 2004. And I've kind of now got a sort of friendship with them as well. So I think art is such a kind of environment where it's a lot of the people that you kind of work with also become your friends as well. So I think it's been about creating those personal relationships and going out to shows and, you know, trying to meet people. And I guess these days we've also got Instagram as a big tool, and I know lots of artists that are maybe a bit younger than me that were like graduating in the last 5 years or something. That's been the way they've been able to sort of launch their careers a bit, because I guess that's the I think even Anka, the way that you're doing these sessions where you're looking at an Instagram page rather than a website, I think is a really interesting sort of way of thinking about it, because we're now, like you said to me before, your Instagram is the way you want to present yourself as an artist, kind of thing. And it's I think that's a really great tool to be able to start your career now as well.
Yeah, that's a thing that I've been thinking about, that all the young graduate students and the one they entered university, they can really work this tool out, and who knows, it might work for them. Yeah. So Caroline, you go to your studio, and what do you do there, you know, to get in the mood? You just, I mean, you enter the door and you just put your hands on the brushes, the canvases there, and you just go like a, you know, like a car.
These days I do know.
Or you need like a little warm up or a little tea, or I don't know what you do.
I usually make a little coffee or something, but as soon as I come in the studio, so I haven't been in the studio since Sunday, and I'm not really that pleased with a couple of paintings I've been working on, so slightly dreading getting in here. And as soon as I get in, I'm like, damn, you know, I know what I've got to sort something out on this, and I just can't even wait to get the cup of coffee going. I'm like sort of trying to fix the thing that I can see is wrong. So I'm quite, it doesn't take me a while to sort of get into it. I usually kind of launch in pretty quickly, because I can't bear looking at something if I know what's wrong with it and I just want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Okay. Is your technique mainly in oils?
Yeah. So all the paintings are certainly end up as oil paintings, but there's so. Well, do you want me to talk a bit about my sort of process and that, or just what?
Yes, I was thinking maybe just put a little screen sharing the screen and to see your paintings, and then I would really love to see around your studio and, you know, just hear you talk about what you do right now. But I'm gonna share my screen with you all now and just look a little bit at Caroline Instagram page. So yeah, this is a proof that you work in oils. Oh, look, clearly oils, right? Do you have a favorite mark of oils?
Oh, what do you mean? Oh, sorry, favorite make. Michael Harding is mostly what I use.
Uh-huh. And as brushes, which are
I've
your
got,
favorites?
a bit of a mix. I'll take you over and you can see my brushes if you like. Just pop you on my palette. So mostly use like for bigger ones. These ones they're called Omega. I don't know if you can see that. So I kind of use.
Yeah, we can see.
Those are what I'm using on big paintings. So I like hog hair brushes for larger sort of work, and quite a lot of these kind of what are they called? Is it filbert? You know, the sort of rounded top ones. I don't know what weight most of them are. I think they're just whatever they have in the art shop. I'm not that fussy. It's more just about the shape and the size of them. I mean, I've got sort of about 100 brushes or something, so I kind of get through them pretty quickly. And for small paintings, or just think, so I don't know if you can see, that's an oil sketch, that's on paper, so that's a study for a big painting. With those, I tend to work with quite soft brushes, so black sable brushes mainly. These are Da Vinci, I think they're called, so in all different sizes. So I've got pretty much every one that you can get, you know, every different sort of shape of brush for those. So I quite like different sort of types for different sizes.
Do you spend time washing them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every night.
What's
every
that
night I clean. So this
50 minutes.
This is my palette. It's very clean. Yeah, every day I like to start like it's completely fresh. I think with the kind of paintings that I make, the color is quite important, that it's exactly what I intend it to be. So if the palette and the brushes aren't totally clean to start off with, then you know, you're always fighting against that. So it's my least favorite bit of the day, cleaning up, but it has to be done.
Actually, your colors, I mean, it's pretty easy to see that you have like really bright colors, and the colors you use in your paintings are really, even if it's not a hyper realistic painting, you do have like a control on your colors. So I assume that keeping your palette clean and starting fresh, let's say, with materials each day, this might be like your technique. So it does help, right? It does help to keep all your brushes and your palette, because it seems like in your paintings.
Yeah, it definitely helps. I think, you know, I need the brushes to stay soft as well. So it's like unless you clean them every night properly, they start getting all, you know, like stuffed up with paint.
I never do that, so. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I prefer to give up on them rather than
chuck them in the bin.
Now I know why you have so many in jars all over the studio.
Exactly. And
how much time do you manage to spend daily in the studio on a regular basis? How many hours can you work?
Well, I've got I had a baby a year ago, so things have been reduced a bit. I now do 3 days a week in here, and that's usually. So I've come in at 9 this morning, and I'll probably leave tonight at about 7. So I'll probably try and get 3 days that are about 8 to 10 hours, and then if I can sort of grab a bit of extra time at the weekend, I will. So I'm quite a sort of regular sort of person. I've always liked working during the day, and preferably working just in daylight. Although at this time of year it's not really possible to have the lights on.
Yeah.
Caroline, we spoke last night, and I said I maybe it's not so much of an interest to say that, but now that Joanna mentioned it, kind of, and also because I see a lot of my girl students here, and I think I changed my mind. I think it would be helpful and maybe interesting to say what happened after your time got reduced due to the fact that you became a mother, because something very positive happened during with your time in the studio.
Yeah,
So do that again.
I'm a lot more productive with the time that I do have, so I'm much more focused. So that's why when you ask me, what do I do when I get in the studio in the morning, I just go straight for it because I know I've only got, quite a limited amount of time. Whereas before I would probably have like come in, made a coffee, looked at Instagram for an hour, like sort of done a little bit of work, then sort of wandered off and sort of, gone and had a coffee somewhere else. I think so. It's it's made me very focused on what I want to achieve in a, I know my 3-day week, where do I want to be at the end of that? And most of the time it's quite a realistic, unrealistic rather, expectation of what I can achieve. But I think it's made me appreciate my studio days more because there's less of them.
So the idea is that you can be productive even if you have less time for your art and for your practice. That
Yeah,
you
less.
You can organize yourself better and
and less headspace. I think I was quite worried before I had my daughter that I might sort of lose focus a bit or sort of not be able to devote, because I'd be sort of very sort of mentally distracted by having a child to look after all the time. But actually, it's maybe better at thinking about my work, I think, as well, because I can, when I'm here, it's all I think about,
Great. You told me that you're working on a future exhibition right now. Can you show us around a little bit? I've seen you have some sketches there. Maybe tell us about the little process.
So I've got a show opening in New York in March, which is what I'm working on at the moment. So I'll give you a little tour around. I don't know, can you sort of see that okay? So these are sketches for a big painting, which I'll show you now. Am I far enough back that you can see most of it?
Yeah, we can see most of it, okay.
Yeah. That's a view out of my bedroom window of my next door neighbour pottering around in her front yard. So the idea for the exhibition is that it's kind of about my local neighbourhood in London because, well, like everybody, I haven't been anywhere this year. And quite kind of thematically, it kind of brings together a couple of things that I've been working with in the last few years. So I've been making a lot of paintings of women at work. So quite a lot of the subjects in this show will be of women at work that I know in my local area, like in the shops that I go into and things. The other ones are more about, so I live on a housing estate, and so this big painting here, which is the detail you showed of the leaves from my Instagram. This is from this painting. I think it was like here or something like that you showed. Yeah, these are views from my house of some of my neighbours as they're going around the estate. And yeah, so it kind of mixes this women at work theme that I've been exploring, but I've also been making work in the past year that's quite personal to me. I just made a big series of paintings which are on show in Edinburgh at the moment about my mum doing housework in the house that I grew up in. So it's still kind of women's work, but it was from a very personal perspective of this it's my mum and this is our family home. So now I'm kind of looking at my world in London, I suppose. This is a sketch for a painting that's going to be a bit like a portrait. I don't know if you can see the photo on the wall. So I'm using this photo, but I'll probably change some things and move some elements of it around a bit. I'll just underneath is where the sort of beginnings of the painting. That's an acrylic. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of the paintings, certainly the bigger ones, have acrylic underpainting. And depending on the painting, some of them are much more built up than others. But maybe we come back to that with talking about process a bit more. I don't know if you can see this big painting very easily. This is my husband is an architect, and his office is also very close to where we live. So this is the woman that runs his sort of office complex sitting outside. I don't know if you can, if the angle's right on that. It's all quite small, my studio. It's all quite tight in here. And then these are a couple of small paintings on board. This is my local cafe. And then that's the same two old ladies with their dog that's in the big painting. So when I was talking about the different brushes, it's these smaller ones on board that I'm really using a lot of those black sable soft brushes for, because the surface is so smooth. Whereas with the large scale works, obviously there's the texture of the canvas, so I kind of like that rougher sort of brush. I think that's all I can really show you, because as you can see, I'm quite stacked up in here. I need a bigger studio, really. Don't know where all the next ones are going to go.
Yeah, I used to have a really small studio, and yeah, I worked in a basement for a while, and it was really productive and fine. So sometimes, yeah, you need a larger space. So, Caroline, do you always have these preparatory drawings, sketches for your?
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw those there, but so these are some of the ones that I was working on for the big dark painting. I might start with something that's really very loose, with just sort of sketching out the ideas. So this was I take a lot of photographs, and it's often the case that the painting, the reference for it might be 2 or 3 photographs that I'm working with, and I'm sort of changing, taking sort of something that's included in one and sort of something that's in something else to put together. So it's these drawings where I'm really working out, oh well, how do I squash these 2 ideas together? And then I think at that stage I start I either go into making this oil sketch, which will be where I'm working out the colours and the palette. Every painting's got quite a specific palette for me. There's a lot of colours in there, but often it might be with like one overriding colour that really keeps recurring in everything. And of course, I'm always working from a coloured ground, so I very rarely get from white. So I'm also thinking about, well, how do I want this colour to sit on top of whatever's underneath? And then I'll be going on to these drawings on graph paper. I don't know if you can really see that on the camera there, but some of them are, like this was the last one that I think I used before I started the big painting. And it's quite a technical drawing, I suppose, really, because particularly with a painting like that, that's got a lot of architectural elements to it. It's quite important for me that I get that perspective right before I get too far into the painting, because I don't want to be shifting big areas of the painting, once I'm well into the oil painting part of it. So I use something like this drawing here as a guide to help me make the acrylic underpainting. So that's why it's all spodumene paint, because it's been used for that. So the acrylic underpainting for me is a bit like, that's where I put the structure down, and that's where I work out those things that are easy to move at that stage, because it's really easy to make a correction with acrylic, but it's much harder with the oil. And it's also where I'm starting to build up the colour. So painting it like that, it's so dark. I don't want, when I put the oil paint on, it to be going on to a really light ground. So I start building up. I don't think it's a pity. It's a pity I don't have something else at that stage in the studio to show you. But maybe spend a day making this acrylic underpainting. It's lots of layers of quite thin glazes almost. Of in this case, it was like all orange and purple, and so it was like bright, actually, much brighter than the oil painting part of it. So I'm using that to sit underneath the oil paint so that it's almost sort of glowing through it a bit, or like making the surface quite rich, so that I then only have to potentially put one quite thin layer of oil paint on the top in order to get this sort of quite depth of colour that I want.
So you always start with this acrylic sketch till you organize everything in their places, and then finish with oils.
Yeah. Sometimes change. I mean, that was for that one, that's quite a developed sort of way of doing it. But for other ones, I get a bit impatient with the acrylic bit, and I'm like, oh, I just want to get onto the oil paint. So I just go on with it. So, and the one that I showed you over there with the sort of smaller kind of portrait format one, whereas the sort of just a drawing of the woman in acrylic, I probably won't do any more in acrylic on that one, because I think it's not like this big structural thing to change, and I'm more excited about just getting onto the oil paint in it. So it just depends on the painting, really.
But normally it's quite, you have a lot of control over the painting, as I see. Don't cultivate accidents and happenings. No? I mean,
yeah. I mean, things do change sometimes, because often what I think is going to work on the big scale doesn't, and I have to then sort of think about how to, if I want to sort of save the painting, what do I need to do to make it work on that scale? But I think the thing I'm always trying to capture, I think, on the large scale, often what I have in the oil sketches, because those are done really quickly and they're quite instinctive in a way. And I want the big paintings to have the same sort of feeling of a sort of immediacy, I suppose. So I have quite a clear idea in my head, I guess, before I start the big paintings, of ideally how I would like them to look. And I'm usually trying to sort of stick to that. So it doesn't, maybe that doesn't sound like the most sort of creative way of working in a way, because I guess I'm not allowing myself to go like too far away from the plan. But I still find it quite an exciting way of making paintings for me, because there's a lot of pleasure in that sort of, how do you get to that with the paint itself,
Caroline, the first time I saw your painting, I think what struck me and what really made take a second look and then appreciate your painting was one, the fluidity of your brush strokes. I mean, you can always wonder if it's acrylic or if it's oils, or it's, it has a certain fluidity. And that's one thing. And then I was really, I always wanted to ask you, and now I have the chance along with my students, what is the technical method, or how do you do to obtain this kind of the light, the interior light? One, it's a light that happens inside of something. And then you have this kind of light, a light that comes from the exterior and through the windows, and it's invading space.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. You need to take the call?
No, I'm just I'm
okay.
Gonna switch my phone off, because
okay. Because if you do, it's absolutely fine.
Sorry, it's not urgent.
So because here, like you really nailed it. nailed it. Just
Thanks.
you have to say it. So what's the deal here? How do you get to make this light to appear like a strong, sunny light that comes from the outside?
Yeah.
And we can really read in your painting that it's it's a light that it's invades the interior, and you have so many different types of whites.
Yeah.
So what's the technique here? What do you do?
So for that particular painting, I think the light it comes down to this sort of underpainting, the coloured ground, and then what kind of whites I'm putting on top. So for the whole of that painting started off as just a flat, very pale sort of peach kind of colour. So I don't think you can probably really see any of it still shining through in the end painting, but maybe just in some of those sort of lightest areas, like in the top right hand, the top of the window that's on the right hand side, you can maybe see a little bit of it. So there's quite sort of pale colour. That's over the whole thing. And by not starting from white, I find that I can then, by adding white into the area that I want to have this really strong sort of sense of sunlight coming through, it makes it much punchier than if it was just adding white on top of white, or starting from a white ground and then trying to put sort of thin water or something on it. So the way I think this, when I started this painting, and the same way that I really start all my paintings, I'm always trying to work from what would spatially be the back to the front. So it's almost like sort of thinking about it in terms of, well, what is this space I'm trying to depict? So in that case, it's I started putting in what was outside the window, and then the window first, and then sort of building up the room around it. So for that kind of light, I was using a zinc white, so quite a transparent white, rather than something like a titanium, which is very opaque and quite chalky. So kind of just to get that quite by putting in that more translucent white, I think you get a better sense of light passing through something rather than it just being a sort of solid object. So, for example, the painting you've got up there at the moment, the small one, the front of that, the house is white. So for that one, I was using titanium white because I wanted it to feel like something that's quite solid rather than something that light is coming from or through. So I'm kind of, thinking about what it is I'm trying to paint. Is it something solid or is it something more ephemeral, like light? So when it's an interior of a room, often that might be using more opaque sort of pigments to offset it against those more translucent areas. I think the thing that I think one of the things that I learned at art school that's always stayed with me. I remember when I was like 19 or something in my second year art school, and we had to do life painting for a week, and we were only allowed to use 6 colours, not including white. And we had to basically learn how to make up every single skin tone using what seemed like 6 colours that weren't going to be very good at that, But I think it sort of taught me a bit of a lesson that actually it's about how everything relates to each other that is what creates this sort of believable space. So it's the interplay of the colours and also this sort of interplay between opaque and translucent that suddenly makes something solid and something recede and other things come forward in that pictorial space.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and still I was just looking at your photos on Instagram right now, and what is really besides this thing, the way you capture the light, even if it's exterior or interior, you have like a distinctive, sign. Is this loose brush stroke that it seemed like really, it can be out of the place of any time, like spinning, and really like it seems like you really painted really fast, but at the same time you capture this realistic sense of the picture, of the painting. So what is your, when do you stop, like when do you stop not to become too realistic? And
Really difficult. It's always the hardest thing. I think it's, yeah, how do I stop? I think it's a bit easier sometimes to make that decision on the big ones because I've got that oil sketch, and there becomes a point where for half of the time that I'm making the work, a big painting, I still think the oil sketch is more interesting than the big painting. And then there becomes this sort of flip halfway through or something where I'm like, oh, actually, like the big painting's got something else in it. And I don't know, it's difficult to say what makes something kind of makes me stop, what makes it finish, because some of that is just about instinct, I think, which I think everybody has about their own work when they kind of think,
of course,
like there's just something about it, I think it's done. But I think it's not, for me, an ideal painting is one where every part of it would be the first shot. Like it's not overworked and not going back into it. I like that sort of freshness of the first sort of attempt at something. And often what I'll do if it's not working to begin with, I make a decision and I just wipe that area off and do it again, and I keep doing it. So often, particularly on like figures and things like that, I might end up painting the face 20, 30 times or something like that. So rather than sort of like putting it and then trying to tinker with it, I just make a decision to take it all off because I know it's going to be best if it has that quickness that sometimes, well, a lot of the time you don't get the quickness right on the first attempt. So I'm always trying to keep that fluidity. And the other thing is a bit of a time scale limit for me. So the small paintings I tend to make in a day. And if I have to, I'll go back and fix something the next day. But I prefer it to all sort of happen in once. I like to work wet and wet. So there is all that sort of mixing on the surface between the paint. And I think that it's often the most sort of throwaway kind of marks that are the most interesting, I think. So although they're quite planned in terms of their composition, they're not planned in terms of how I'm actually going to execute or describe those objects or that space. I like that to be quite fluid.
That was my next question, or rather an observation than a question, but you already mentioned it, that this type of fluidity that it's shown in your work, I assume comes out also from the fact that you paint on wet. You don't, I mean, this is how it looks like you exploit the fresh paint on your surface.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I like about having that acrylic underpainting, I think, because it gives, there's something solid and fixed underneath, which I can choose to sort of play with or not. But actually, so the painting you've got up there of the living room, that one, for example, had quite a detailed underpainting because it's this quite architectural space of a room, and I had to get the perspective right on it. But because that was fixed in with the acrylic, I could then, with the oil paint, not worry about getting a wall in the right place. I could just enjoy moving the paint around and think about how things sort of sit together. And yeah, I think, again, thinking about that sort of how thick or thin the paint is, and then sort of playing with that as well. So in that painting, the area that's in the reflection in the mirror above the fireplace is actually, I think I'd painted quite a lot of that in the underpainting. So what you see in the finished painting there is oil paint on it, but it's so thin, and it's really just a sort of few kind of extra things to lift it into the rest of the space of the painting. Whereas the walls of the room itself around it were all quite solidly painted. But I kind of, I when I'm working on something, I tend to move from area to area. So rather than working on the whole thing at once, and then sort of working it all up to the same degree at once, I'll tend to work on one area one day and hopefully get that to a stage that it might end up in the final painting. And then the next day I move across onto the next sort of part, so that each part has this, is still working within that wet and wet sort of system.
Yeah. So I can see here, so the light, when you put the light, is it like a thick layer of paint or not necessarily?
I think that one, that one is quite thick. It started off with a thin layer, but I wanted it to sit, again, as how is this, what is space I'm describing here? It's a corner with recessed bookshelves, the books, and then this light sitting in front of it, and it's the light source for that. So I wanted the lampshade to actually probably be the thickest bit of painting in that space, so that it sat, it really sort of sat in front of the corner. So for that, I think will have used something like titanium white mixed with a bit of the, that sort of yellow, I think it's the Indian yellow or something that I was using quite a lot of there to describe the sort of diffusion of the light coming from the lamp.
I can see that first when I saw your paintings, they were all about, let's go a little further, outdoor scenes, but scenes like with pools and gardens and nightscapes, and it was a different thing. And now I can see that you work more on interior scenes, and the light changed a little bit. It got warmer, right?
Yeah. Really, all of my paintings now start off as these sort of warm, peachy kind of pale yellow grounds. Whereas they used to be a lot more, just really different kind of light. I think the paintings that you're probably thinking of are a lot of the ones that I made of California.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not finding them right now, but
it's quite. You have to go back quite a way. I think it's.
Yeah, because I want to show you.
I think there are some from. I think you must be near some there. Maybe.
Anyway, now you've changed a little bit. This might be one of them.
Yeah. I think my way of working's changed really. When I was making the paintings of LA and quite a lot of those other sort of outdoor kind of ones, I was working with models, and I was hiring locations, and I was doing these quite directed photo shoots with almost a narrative that I was coming up with and directing. And I maybe worked like that for about 6 or 7 years. But I felt like it was maybe I was getting to a little bit of a dead end with it, because I was having to generate all of the narrative and come up with all these ideas, and I was kind of designing how these paintings would look before I'd really even sort of done anything. And it was always quite a high pressure. So some of these paintings, the ones that you've got up at the moment, those were done in this house in the Hollywood Hills in LA. And it was really high pressure. I had this woman that was painting come to stay with me there for a couple of days. And I had this sort of timetable of all these photos and different outfits and things and all these different scenes that we were going to be doing together for the paintings. And I only had this really short window to get all of this material that was then going to last me for at least a year. And it just felt like so many decisions were being made about paintings that I would be making quite a long way off in a really condensed sort of time space. Sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering why did you felt like you need all this to direct everything for this theme with Californian spaces and pools and
Yeah, I think it was something that just started gradually when I was at art school, doing my MA. I've been painting figures and interiors since about 2003, 2004. So my general subject matter has really been the same for a long time. But when I was on my MA, I started to, or one of the characteristics of doing an MA is that you're expected to kind of pick your work apart and sort of look at all the reasons that you do everything and kind of justify them, I suppose. And it became started to think about all the things that make us read these kind of paintings. So how are we interpreting what the story that might be presented is? It's who we're looking at, what do they look like, what are they wearing, how old are they, where are they, what kind of space is that, what time of day it is, what sort of interior it has, what's the landscape, what's the weather like, so all of these kind of elements. I suppose I was starting to think about the paintings almost in this quite filmic way of how you construct narrative. And that started at the time when I was on my MA. I started working with a life model who was she didn't have a permanent home, and every time I went to work with her, she was staying at a different house. She was dog and cat sat for people, and that's kind of how she sort of had somewhere to stay in London. So every time I worked with her, she was in a different house, and that almost kind of suddenly created this different setting every time. She was a constant, but there was these different houses, and then made me sort of think about, what do we think? How do we think differently about her as a subject depending on which house she's in? So that after I graduated, I think that then started me off on this path of I started taking each of those sort of elements, I suppose, of what it was that might construct narrative and exploring them with each body of work. Maybe not in a sort of very conscious way, but just through exploring different things. And I think I got onto sort of making these quite these paintings of quite luxurious spaces, I suppose, because my paintings had always been going down this slightly what's the word? They always had a sense of foreboding about them, I suppose. And a lot of that was being generated by the kinds of interiors that I was selecting. And I started to think, well, what can you still create that if you have a really beautiful setting and there's a swimming pool and it's all sunny and it's this kind of place that you should imagine is perfect. So I think that's what sort of took me there. And then I gradually just got more and more sort of constructed, and I got really into that idea of this constructed narrative, and especially with some of the subjects that I was picking. So this series of work, there's an example of an underpainting, an acrylic underpainting. So this series of work with this woman in LA, the work itself, this whole method of making the work of it being so kind of constructed and contrived in a way, seemed to really fit the character that she was in these paintings. So the woman, the model, she's a former Miss America pageant contestant. She was Miss Colorado in 1977, and she was a very beautiful woman. She's in her 60s now, and she's still very conscious of her image. So a lot of those paintings were really about this kind of management of this personal image as well, and it was trying to sort of hang on to something. So that it seemed appropriate that the paintings themselves would be incredibly managed images from every part of the way that they were put together. But I think I felt like I was running out of a bit of juice, I suppose, in terms of how much narrative I could sort of add to these. And around the same time, I was commissioned by a gallery in the UK called Kettle's Yard in Cambridge. It's a public gallery, and this was in 2016. They commissioned me to make some work in response to the refugee crisis, which was like a very different topic to what I was working on in the studio at the time. And it really marked a big shift, I think, in the way that I just started approaching my work altogether. It took a long time to work out how I was going to make work in response to that brief, but in the end, the work ended up being a collaboration with a charity in London to make a series of portraits of women refugees living in London in whatever accommodation they happened to be in at that time. And I went from having made these paintings of this woman in LA, where I was controlling every visual aspect of it, to suddenly making paintings which were all about responding to somebody else's situation and the environment that they were in and their story. Well, that's I think there might be some of those pictures of it on the Instagram. That's one of the paintings there of one of the women that I worked with. So she was that woman was called Joy, and I went to visit her at an apartment she was staying in, which is actually really close to where I live in London. And I'd met her before, but I hadn't been to her house before. So I didn't have really any expectations. I just sort of had to come into her house and sort of suddenly use all the sort of tools, I guess, that I've developed that I use to construct images, to suddenly look at a different space and think, okay, well, what are the things in this room that maybe tell me about her, or that tell a viewer about who they're looking at, and what kind of space this is. So that it was a bit of an eye-opener, I suppose, just to work in a totally different way like that, and made me realize that I'd been spending all these years trying to make up interesting stories when there's all these people that live really near me in London, that like the stories are there, you know, and that actually real people's lives are much more interesting than what I was trying to generate in myself. And I think that's what created this shift into where my method of working now, which is much more, I suppose, documentary in approach. Everything I'm painting, I'm depicting elements of their real lives, really.
So, Caroline, I have a short question as well. When you decide to start a new project, to work for an exhibition or to develop a series of paintings, what's normally the process? Do you just get inspired by walking around in the neighborhoods, or are there any narratives or books or theoretical things that inspire you? How do you change topics?
Probably more the former. It's probably more I think I've always been more excited by what's around me, and that's what gives me the next idea for something. And some of the things are just one idea maybe leads into another, or sometimes I'll have an idea sitting around in my head for ages, and it might be to do with a program I've heard on the radio or an article I've read in a newspaper about a particular sort of industry or a particular type of women or something, and but it might be a while before that actually turns into something that I can think about making work from. So with the current series, it took me a few months to decide that this is what I wanted to do. I started thinking about what this show might be back in April. And that was when we were in the first sort of lockdown. And so much of my work relies on being able to go and meet people that I don't know, you know, often meeting people for the first time, or sort of entering a space that isn't that familiar to me, like whether that's somebody else's space of work or another person's house, or traveling somewhere to do something. So I was a bit kind of stuck thinking, oh, well, none of that stuff's probably going to be an option for this show. So I had to sort of start thinking about what is an option, and if most of the work is really reflecting on what it feels like to be in a big city or something, or what it feels like to sort of, in my life, what do I see as I'm sort of making my way about. It's like, well, this year all I really see is these same few streets right where I live, so it's to make sense that that's what the subject would be for this show.
So you get out of the house and start hunting for a good idea for a painting.
Yeah.
So it's quite easygoing. Good practice.
Caroline, do you always like make? I mean, I know you have an architect husband, and it might help. But do you always, as I can see here, well,
I like the one you picked.
Yeah, well, he's there. Do you always like make a physical sketch of your exhibition? Is that important to you, or does it help? I mean, when you're thinking about the exhibition, does the space where you're about to exhibit your works interfere with the process of your paintings, or just with the arrangement of the space?
If it's an unusual space, so like not a kind of white cube sort of space, then I guess that would be a consideration from the start about what kind of work, you know, is going to look appropriate in that sort of space. But most of the time, most of the shows I'm doing are in, you know, sort of quite like standard kind of white walled gallery spaces. So the models in those cases is much more just about working out scale, numbers of works, how a group sits together. So that's something that, and I tend not to think about, I never really think about individual paintings that much. When I'm starting thinking about a show, from the beginning, I'm thinking about the group and what the interaction is between those different paintings and different scenes. So I'll just show you some. Like, this is the list I've got on my wall at the moment. You probably can't, I don't know if you can see any of the writing on that, but I've got these are the different subjects that are included in this show. So like Latteria, that's the cafe. Savery, that's the chemist that I'm painting. Paula, that's the room behind me. Got Bakers, so these are the different subjects, and then I've got a list of what I imagine I'm going to do with each one. So I'm thinking I'm going to do 2 big paintings of the cafe, because one of them's going to be a night scene from outside, the other one's going to be an interior scene. Like another one, you know, a big painting of the chemist, and then the small one that's a portrait. So I'm working out numbers of paintings and thinking about what does this series of work look like in my head. You know, what's the balance of inside, outside, different times of day, different types of subjects. So I use the model really as a way. So one of the trainees in my husband's office has just made me a very nice model of the gallery in New York, which is a bit terrifying because it's a lot bigger than I thought. It's good for me to have it at this stage. So this probably this week or next week, I'm gonna, now that I think I know what most of the paintings might roughly look like, I'm gonna print them to what scale I think will probably work and put them into this model and see how that looks. And it's that point I might make a decision, okay, well, that doesn't work, so let's get rid of that and replace it with a different type of image, or maybe I need more sort of a certain size, which, yeah, I suppose that all sounds quite sort of maybe controlled about what the thing will look like at the end, but I find that that's the easiest way to work for me, to be in control of the whole group, you know, from the start, really.
Yeah. Because we are talking now for an hour, and we are approaching the finish of this art talk. I'm gonna go to the questions we have here, like 2, but maybe more. And my friend Julia Tokac, who's in US right now, said, "Dirty dishes never look this good." I suppose it was while I was binging through your images on Instagram, and she's right, actually. Yes, but I have a student, a second-year student, which I salute. Hi, Maria. She's asking, when do you think your career began? At what point? I think she meant maybe when did you feel like you're valid on this field in the business art world, and you felt like, well, this is something happening, like someone bought your painting, you're about to have exhibition, like books we've seen. So
I
you
think
can pinpoint that moment or not.
it's difficult to sort of think of, like, I don't think it happens of a particular kind of moment. Maybe it does for some artists, but for me it's been like a really slow kind of incline, you know, going up. It wasn't like there's a sort of wow, a particular moment. And I've been lucky in that I've always sold my work since I was a student. So there was always that sort of element of like, well, I know I can, you know, somebody's going to buy these things. So like I can probably sort of just about survive or something. Oh, hang on, sorry, I've got just plug my laptop in. But I reckon probably maybe about 10 years ago. I think after graduating from Royal College, I did feel that there was enough of interest in my work. It was about 10 years ago that I met people like Jane Neal, and that's when I started showing quite regularly. I suppose it felt like maybe it was a little bit shaky, but I thought I would always have some sort of career as an artist at that stage, whether it would be, you know, whether I'd be successful or not. I thought I'd still be able to always be able to make paintings.
Okay, and we have another question from a dear student of mine from our theoretical department, Juana Dico. And you can see why she's asking that, because she's studying curatorial practices. Hi, Juana. Do you think it's important to exist a close relationship? Because a relationship is obviously there between an artist and a curator and a gallerist, but she's saying, is it important to exist a close relationship between an artist and a curator, or is just a cold professional one? Which one do you think works better for you, for example?
For me, it's difficult. Sometimes having a very, you know, close personal relationship with somebody can make things difficult if you don't agree on things, or you have a sort of, I don't know, or a different take on how you should approach things. I have quite a close relationship now with my the galleries that I work with, like personal relationship, and I find that that's really great. I really like that. It feels like we're working together as a team, and I think that that's The same, probably the same for the curators as well. So somebody like Jane, who started off as a sort of work person and became a really close friend of mine, and I actually met she introduced me to my husband. So I think that kind of thing can work really well. But I think it's about having relationships with lots of people as well. I don't think it's necessarily that productive just to have this sort of one person that you have this conversation with, because I think the thing that makes you progress as an artist, sort of in terms of your work, and as you know, aside from your career or anything like that, is having lots of different kinds of conversations with different people and getting input from different places.
So a conclusion would be, it's nice to have a close relationship with a curator, but it also
Maybe not an exclusive one.
Until other students maybe think about another question, I will ask you a question I can see I've managed to make a little tradition here. I start with the question and then I end up with the same question I put to all my guests. So I'm gonna ask that question to you also. If you would go back in time and you would see yourself like in the first year of university or second, or I don't know, would you have an advice for yourself? Or maybe that would be the same advice you would give to my young students that are here to listen and to talk to you. Now that you're wiser, of course.
Yeah, I think if I could go back in time, I would have stopped hanging around in the pub so much, drinking. And I think I'd have been more confident about what it was I was interested in. I think when I think back to my time at art school in Glasgow, I don't think I really found my feet until I was 6 months before I was leaving. And that's when I found my subject. But by that point, it was nearly over. And I think I spent the first 3 years feeling very unsure about, who I was, what I wanted to paint, how to paint it. And wasn't confident about looking at the art that I was interested in. When I think I knew what it was, when I look back to the things I liked as a teenager, when I was at school, a lot of those are still the same things now, or I still it's the same things that I liked drawing as a little girl. But maybe I think to be confident in your instincts, I suppose, about what it is who you are as an artist, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so students, be confident, okay? Is Caroline Walker's advice to you. And if you don't have other questions, we have it's more than 1 hour and a half of talking. So if you don't have other questions, just we're gonna say thank you to Caroline being here. Come on, it's your last chance to make a question. If not, yes. And thank you.
1 hour and a half of painting, so
yeah.
From your time.
Yes.
We are cool.
Exactly. So thank you for being here with us and having a chat with us. You see, you didn't have to prepare any PowerPoint.
Yeah. PowerPoints are boring anyway. It's much better, fresh in the studio.
Exactly. And
that's really nice.
We wish you a lot of success and with your future exhibition.
Thank you.
Just stay close to us, keep in touch maybe from time to time, let's have a chat online for our students, because at these hard times our studios are closed, and as you saw, my colleague is very skeptical about open up the studios in January. I was hoping for that, but bummer. I think it's really difficult for students to stay motivated in this time.
Yeah.
As you said, when you're in school, it doesn't really matter that much if you have if you're in the mood to paint or not. You always have the professor there to bug you and to say, come on, you have to paint, you have a deadline. And now we are not there with them, and we have to motivate them through online, which is harder. But I still hope that talking with artists, with you and Justin and other fellow artists, might let them see that art can still happen even if we are isolated, and that it can also be good, like really good. So thank you again for your presence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and hopefully we will see each other again in our next artist talk. Okay?
Cool. Great.
Thank you for turning on your cameras. It wasn't so painful, was it?
See you all.
You look all fresh, nice, and beautiful. Okay, Caroline. Bye.